The most powerful empire in the world fell without a battle, only because of three words written by an invisible hand. The atmosphere of ancient Babylon seemed unshakable, as if every golden wall proclaimed eternity. But behind the visible grandeur, there was a subtle whisper of fragility that few dared to hear. The same reality we find today when we face products with an expiration date serves as a profound metaphor for what God reveals about nations. Nothing remains beyond the time He determines. Just as we read in Daniel 2:21, He changes the times and the seasons, He removes kings and sets up kings. Every empire, no matter how glorious it may seem, carries a silent countdown known only by the Creator. When we walk through the scenes described by the prophet Daniel, we realize that human history has never been loose in randomness. It moves within the boundaries established by the Lord, who raises kings, overthrows thrones, and directs the destiny of civilizations as one who firmly holds the helm of all history. And it is in this setting that we are led to the grand prophecy of Daniel chapter 2, where the statue composed of metals, gold, silver, bronze, and iron mixed with clay, is not merely a symbolic vision, but a prophetic map revealing the lifespan of each empire. The head of gold represented Babylon in all its strength, splendor, and apparent invincibility, but its brilliance, however intense, would not be eternal. In today's lesson, we witness the moment when this head of gold begins to crumble before the rise of a kingdom inferior in glory, but superior in purpose, the kingdom of the Medes and Persians, symbolized by the arms of silver. Every detail Daniel describes is fulfilled before our eyes as a divine dramatization of God's sovereignty over all ages. Thus, when we open the Bible, we are not merely before history, but before a living script that reveals how heaven silently rules over everything the earth considers solid and permanent. Therefore, as we dive into today's study, it is as if we were invited to walk through the corridors of time, witnessing the exact moment when Babylon, intoxicated by its own pride, reached the limit imposed by God upon its dominion. The conquest by the Medes and Persians was not merely a military event, but the execution of a heavenly decree that had been announced decades earlier. When you open your Bible and follow this event, you will realize that nothing, absolutely nothing, catches God by surprise. Empires rise, empires fall, civilizations flourish and then crumble, but the eternal purpose remains steady as an indestructible rock. This journey is not only historical, it is spiritual. As we advance, you will feel that the same God who marked the expiration date of Great Babylon is the God who today guides the course of your life, leading everything with wisdom, precision, and love. The grandeur of Babylon still echoed through the wide avenues lit by torches, as if every glazed brick proclaimed the glory of an empire that believed it had earned the right to last forever. For more than 60 years, that kingdom had ruled the known world with a firm hand and incomparable brilliance. And the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, with his 43 years of rule, seemed to have carved into the heart of the nation the feeling of invincibility. However, after his death, the gears of power began to move differently, silently, and inevitably. Nabonidus, his son-in-law, ascended to the throne as legitimate heir, but he was a distant king, more concerned with religious cults and prolonged travels than with the challenges of the capital. To keep the throne secure in his absence, he elevated his own son Belshazzar to the position of co-regent, allowing the young monarch to govern Babylon while he was away. Belshazzar, grandson of Nebuchadnezzar on his mother's side, carried in his name the weight of a powerful lineage, but he had not inherited the fear that the great king developed after his encounters with the God of heaven. His heart was marked not by wisdom, but by presumption. It was during his reign, amid extravagant feasts, exaggerated self-confidence, and a false sense of security provided by the monumental walls, that the dramatic events recorded in Daniel chapter 5 would take shape. The words the prophet wrote now come to life before us. A Babylon shining on the outside, but corroded on the inside. A king seated on the throne, yet far from perceiving that his empire was already moving toward the end decreed decades earlier. And so, while the city celebrated in delirium, heaven prepared a night that would forever change the course of history. While the feast advanced through the halls of Babylon, the music echoed like a war of arrogance that attempted to drown out any memory of the God who had humbled Belshazzar's grandfather years earlier. Wine flowed across the tables in dark rivers, and the guests sank into orgies that revealed the moral decay of an empire that no longer distinguished the sacred from the profane. Dominated by drunkenness and pride, Belshazzar made the decision that would cross the centuries as a symbol of direct affront to heaven. He ordered that the sacred utensils taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought in, the very vessels that had been consecrated for the worship of the Most High God. This was not merely insolence, it was open defiance, an attempt to humiliate the God he considered defeated. As they raised wine inside the sacred vessels, they laughed, mocked, and toasted to the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, as if the Creator were absent from the scene. The historian Flavius Josephus states that a few months before that night, Nabonidus had effectively abdicated, leaving the throne completely in the hands of Belshazzar, which explains the young king's boldness in acting as one who held absolute control over Babylon. Drunk not only with wine, but with the illusion of power, he believed he could mock the God of Israel without consequences. His blurred eyes barely noticed that, outside the city, the Medo-Persian army was already advancing silently, fulfilling the divine decree pronounced decades earlier. In that hall, illuminated by flickering lamps, Belshazzar raised the holy vessel with impure hands, unaware that judgment was already crossing the palace gates. The sound of laughter was loud, but heaven's silence was even deeper, and it was about to be broken by something that would interrupt the feast, the pride, and the reign in a single instant. Then, in the midst of the tumult of the feast, the impossible happened. A hand appeared, visible, real, without any body sustaining it, moving upon the white-plastered wall of the great hall. The festive sound stopped suddenly, as if the very air had been ripped away. The hand wrote unknown words, each stroke shimmering like fire, and terror spread like a cold wave. Belshazzar turned pale, his knees knocked together, and his trembling voice barely managed to order the magicians and soothsayers of the empire to be brought, the same men who had already failed before the mysteries revealed by God in chapters 2 and 4. And once again, before a scene no human could explain, their wisdom became nothing. As the scriptures say, "Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world?" The same happens with us. When the Babylons we build cannot answer our crises, we discover that only the Creator of heaven and earth has the word that truly illuminates what is hidden. While panic spread, the Queen Mother, the widow of the great king and grandmother of Belshazzar, an experienced woman, knowledgeable of the stories of the past, entered the hall, perceiving the confusion that had taken hold. Her presence brought a brief moment of order. With a firm yet respectful voice, she warned Belshazzar of his imprudence and reminded him that Babylon had for decades a man capable of revealing mysteries and interpreting enigmas. This man was Daniel, now older but still distinguished by an excellent spirit. She reminded the king that his ancestor, Nebuchadnezzar, called father in Daniel 5:18 in the sense of ancestor, as is common in the scriptures, as we see in 1 Kings 15:11, had entrusted Daniel with positions of honor precisely because of the wisdom God had given him. When the prophet's name was spoken, a new silence fell over the hall, for at that moment everyone realized that the answer they sought would not come from gods of stone or from the wise men of the court, but from the one who walked with the Spirit of the living God. The hall still echoed with drunken laughter when Daniel entered, bringing with him a serenity that violently contrasted with the emotional chaos dominating the king. Belshazzar, still pale, attempted to maintain an air of authority,
but his eyes revealed the deep terror that had invaded him since the mysterious hand had appeared writing on the wall. Before touching the enigma, Daniel raised his voice firmly and began recalling the journey of the one who had truly understood the weight of divine sovereignty, Nebuchadnezzar. The prophet described with precision how the greatness, glory, and majesty mentioned in Daniel 5:18 through 19 were given by God himself, and how the great king, filled with pride, lost everything when he exalted himself above the Most High. Driven out from among men, living like an animal, his humiliated days were a reminder that no throne remains when it attempts to take God's place. With each word, silence in the hall grew, as if the very written wall awaited the outcome of that speech. Daniel continued, stating that Nebuchadnezzar only regained his honor when he acknowledged that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men, exalting whomever he wills. Then, with a courage no wine could silence, Daniel turned directly to the king and declared, "And you, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this." It was as if a spiritual blade cut through the atmosphere, slicing the monarch's pride in front of everyone. Even knowing the past, even seeing what God had done with his ancestor, Belshazzar chose to repeat the error, multiplying irreverence, arrogance, and rebellion. He knew the warnings, but insisted on challenging the God who controls times, kingdoms, and destinies. And now, before the flaming writing on the wall, he would discover that no proud heart remains standing when heaven decides to pronounce judgment. That night advanced like a ritual of insolence, and the heart of Belshazzar seemed to beat in open defiance against the God his grandfather had learned to fear. Daniel, standing before the king, firmly exposed the root of the downfall that was already approaching. The sin was not merely drunkenness or irreverence, but the deep arrogance that blinded the monarch. Belshazzar had despised history, rejected heaven's warnings, and chosen to worship inert gods, silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, all incapable of seeing, hearing, or responding. While he boasted before mute idols, he ignored that his very life, his breath, his crown, and every beat of his heart belonged to the Most High God, who sustains the universe with the same ease with which he sustains a king's breath. The silent hall seemed to watch truth collapse upon the monarch. The one who considered himself invincible was about to be reminded that no human power can remain when it rises against the holiness and authority of the Creator.
On that night, marked by pride and drunkenness, each word inscribed on the wall became a divine decree, echoing above the tumult of the banquet, and Daniel, standing before the king, explained the deep meaning of each term as a messenger who tears the veil between the visible and the eternal. Mene, he declared, carried the weight of time measured by God himself. The number of Belshazzar's years had reached its limit, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could extend the deadline determined by the Most High. Tekel revealed the most intimate judgment. The king had been weighed in the heavenly balance and found wanting, not before men, but before the God who searches hearts and rules empires. Parsin, or Peres, announced the final sentence. The kingdom would be divided, broken, split, handed over to the Medes and Persians. As Daniel's voice echoed through the hall, the air seemed to stop, as if the palace itself were listening to the verdict of eternity, and each subject began to realize that Babylon's golden shine was nothing but a veneer over a structure already rotten by sin and pride. Scripture was fulfilled with relentless precision. On the same night, while Belshazzar still tried to absorb the words that sealed his destiny, the Persian army advanced silently around the city. Herodotus reports that the waters of the Euphrates were diverted, lowering the river level and opening a way for soldiers to march through the shallow riverbed. But there was something deeper behind this military feat. The entrances that should have protected the heart of the city, bronze gates, underground passages, defense mechanisms, had been neglected. Babylon's blind confidence in its own fortress had made it vulnerable. Wine, arrogance, and prolonged feasting had left gates open, guards scattered, and an entire empire surrendered to carelessness. Thus, while the city celebrated, the enemies advanced, and what seemed impossible became reality. Babylon fell not only because of Cyrus's strategy, but because of the internal corruption that had destroyed its soul long before its walls were touched. From that point on, the biblical narrative intertwines with the history recorded by ancient chroniclers, revealing clearly that no human force can sustain a kingdom when God decrees its end. Belshazzar's pride, added to the desecration of the sacred vessels and his refusal to honor the Lord even knowing Nebuchadnezzar's past, precipitated his fall. The city that once boasted of being eternal now sank in silence, and the hand that wrote on the wall remained as an eternal symbol that God not only observes nations, He weighs, He judges, He determines. As the Persians occupied the palace, it became evident that the empire had perished long before it was invaded. Its fall had been prepared by the abandonment of justice, the arrogance of its rulers, and the disdain for the ways of the living God. And thus ends the night that marked the fall of the head of gold, fulfilling with exactness the prophetic word announced decades earlier, showing that when God speaks, history bows. As night advanced over Babylon, something greater than armies and military strategies was already in motion. The ancient words of the prophets proclaimed decades earlier descended upon the city like an inevitable decree. Isaiah had announced, "Who says to the deep waters, 'Dry up, and I will dry up your rivers'? Who says of Cyrus, 'He is my shepherd'?" And now, in the silence of the banks of the Euphrates, this prophecy took real form. The waters receded, obeying the one who commands seas and destinies, opening a path for the liberator to advance unseen. Nahum likewise warned about the violence and lies that filled the soul of the city. Woe to the bloody city, full of lies and violence, and each word seemed to echo within the walls, denouncing the weight of corruption that had suffocated the empire. Jeremiah reinforced the judgment, declaring that Babylon's wickedness would turn against itself, that its rebellion would punish it, and that the fear of the Lord had been abandoned. Now all these prophetic voices aligned like rays converging at a single point, the moment when God would reveal that no human power resists when the Most High decides to close the cycle of a nation. The prophetic narrative reveals that nothing escapes the gaze of the Most High. Even the time of His people's exile had been determined with precision. Jeremiah 25 verses 11 and 12 had already declared that Israel would remain 70 years in captivity, a period necessary for the land to rest and for the people to recognize the seriousness of their departure from God. When those years were completed, judgment would fall upon Babylon as the Lord Himself had promised. This sentence did not come unexpectedly, for long before it, God had already announced that the pride, violence, and idolatry of that nation would reach their limit. No wall, no matter how high or imposing, can rise against the decree of heaven. So, when we witness the unfolding of these events, we realize that history does not spin loosely. It fulfills, step by step, the word the Lord had already revealed to His prophets. The fall of Babylon serves not only as historical record, it opens a striking parallel with the book of Revelation. There, a symbolic Babylon appears as a representation of religious systems that have drifted from truth, intoxicated with human doctrines, and persecuting the faithful servants of the Lord. In Revelation 17 and 18, this spiritual Babylon is described as corrupt, deceitful, and drunk with the blood of the saints, destined to fall under the final judgment of the righteous God.
Just as literal Babylon fell because of its sins, spiritual Babylon will be destroyed by the glorious manifestation of Christ, who will come as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Revelation 19 verses 11 to 16, establishing an eternal kingdom where justice will finally triumph. If God's hand were to write today on the wall of your life, what would be written? Time expired, found wanting, or approved before heaven? This is the question Daniel 5 forces us to ask, not about Belshazzar, but about us. Thank you very much for watching until the end. If this message spoke to your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. May God powerfully bless your life.